One of the best things in video games is the bosses, the enemies that really test your skill. Today, I'm going to go over my top 10 favorite bosses in video games. Keep in mind, this is my personal list, so it may conflict with yours. If you have any ideas of who you would have put on the list, feel free to put it in the comments. Also, a couple of rules. 1. This list is based on games that I have either played or owned. 2. I try to have my list use one entry per series, although sometimes I let a couple of exceptions slip. I actually have a bunch of lists in the works. Finally, I try not to have the same character on multiple different lists. This also has a couple of exceptions, but I try not to let that happen. Also, just FYI, the clips I'm using are from YouTube, since I either don't own currently, or I simply don't feel like turning the games on just for a 20-second long clip. Anyway, without further ado, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. One of my favorite boss fights in video games from my childhood was actually from a racing game, specifically Mario Kart DS. Mario Kart DS had an interesting mode that no other Mario Kart game had, Mission Mode. I really liked the different bosses you could fight, like King Boo, Wiggler, and the Big Bully. But one of my favorite fights in this game was Icarus. You have to grab item blocks to get green shells and throw them at the eyes on his palms, all the while dodging his attacks. Although I haven't played this game in a while because I gave my copy to my brother who accidentally sold his, I still remember enjoying this fight very much. It's on number 10, simply because I just don't remember too much about it. All I know is that I really did enjoy it. Most of the Spongebob video games were really kind of bad. However, 3 of them were really fun. SpongeBob Lights Camera Pants, which is kind of similar to Mario Party, SpongeBob the Movie The Game, and SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. One of the most memorable boss fights in Battle for Bikini Bottom, in my opinion, is the Patrick Robot fight. Probably because it was pretty creepy and dark for a game centered around a younger audience. You start off the fight with the robot freezing Squidward. SpongeBob jumps in to defeat him by hitting the kick me sign on his back. Then he freezes SpongeBob and begins to pull a lever that drops acid on the floor. So you have to play as Sandy and lasso crates into the acid to reach him. Overall, this is a somewhat scary fight when I first fought it, considering I was so young. Yet, it was nonetheless very memorable for me, and one of my favorites to look back on. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I remember those being one of my first and favorite games on the DS, along with Super Mario 64 DS. I remember loving the first games, and being completely psyched to play the second ones. I didn't quite like the second ones as much, because they made it to where if you reset in the middle of a dungeon, it acts like you died, meaning you lose most of your items, all your money, and have to restart the dungeon with these losses. However, one of the most memorable boss fights in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2, in my opinion, was Dusknoir. He's not that hard by himself, but unfortunately for you, he has an army of Sableye, who outnumber you, even if you have all 4 party members. This made this fight extremely hard, but also memorable, along with the story that comes with it, which I won't spoil. I think the difficulty of this fight is why it deserves a spot at number 8. I don't play Resident Evil that often, unless I already know what's going to happen. I did, however, watch a Let's Play of the first game's director's cut, a couple Let's Plays of Resident Evil 4, and I did watch my dad play Resident Evil 4 when I was younger. Number 4 is definitely my favorite. I did pick it up recently, and I actually have a video of it on my channel. And although I didn't record this fight, the Del Lago was really fun. I like the fact that it gives you unlimited ammo in the form of fishing spears. I also like how it is completely different from the rest of the way the game works, making for a really fun battle. I've talked about how Super Mario 64 DS was one of my first DS games, and it was definitely one of my favorites back then. However, since I was so young and I didn't get to the later levels very often, I would often find myself on the easier, earlier levels, such as the fight against Goom Boss. I remember playing against that guy time and time again, figuring out different tricks to quickly get behind him and spit another Goomba at him, or simply punch him, considering I had unlocked Mario by that point. It was one fight I remember pretty well from my childhood, which is why it sucks that my cartridges finally stopped working. I don't play the PlayStation very often. Most of the games I have for it are very obscure, such as Resonance of Fate, Valkyria Chronicles, Rune Factory, which is one of my personal favorites, and Asher's Wrath. Asher's Wrath isn't really all that much of a game, so much as it is a series of cutscenes with a bunch of QuickTime events and a few actual levels here and there. It is, however, very intense, and although I haven't played too much of it, I have gotten to one of the funniest and most epic fights in the game, the planetary battle against Gonjin Wyzen. Wyzen was once your friend, although he's turned against you and seeks to kill you. To do this, he becomes planetary-sized using the powers of your very daughter Mithra, and literally tries to crush you with his index finger. This fight is very intense. Even though it mostly consists of QuickTime events, then I'm pretty sure you don't even get penalized for failing. I love watching this fight, with a few button combinations here and there, because it shows the craziest and most intense fight about the puny underdog defeating his gigantic enemy. Icarus Uprising is one of the best 3DS games in my opinion to date, which kinda makes sense considering it was created by Sakurai, the creator of the ever-amazing Super Smash Bros. Series. Icarus Uprising has some of the best dialogue of any game I've ever played. It's funny, clever, and often left me laughing so hard I had to show my brothers. This game has some great gameplay too, including one boss in particular, Hydra. He's basically a form of Hydra, although instead of growing 2 more heads if you cut one off, his heads can survive individually after being severed, which means that after killing one of them in the air battle, you have to go down to the ground to fight a lone head, and eventually the last one who's grown another body. Plus, they have unique dialogue depending on what order you kill them. One of my favorite of his lines is when you kill the sophisticated one last.
Look how far you've come, Pit. I'm proud of you.
Huh. You don't usually meet such nice bosses.
Let's get you back.
I don't know why, but ever since last summer, I've been obsessed with the Rune Factory series. For those of you who don't know what it is, since anyone I ask has never heard of it, it's a spin-off of Harvest Moon, which more people have heard of. In Harvest Moon, you get to farm and date NPCs, and live a normal rural life. In Rune Factory, you can do all of that, along with taking up your sword and going through the dungeons to fight bosses. In my personal opinion, I tried to play a Harvest Moon game, and I was bored. I love Rune Factory though, and I think it has to do with the fact that Rune Factory has the fighting aspect, as well as the fact that the characters are anime style in Rune Factory, whereas in Harvest Moon, they seem to be more of a younger cartoon style. No offense to anyone who loves Harvest Moon, as I know it has a large following, but I simply don't find it as interesting as its spin-off. Anyway, the boss that I have on this list is in number 3 is the final boss of the most recent game, Rune Factory 4. Spoiler alert. And okay, Ethelbert, the Emperor of the Setges Empire. Okay, I know how it's really pronounced, but I prefer not to go there. One of my favorite aspects of this boss fight is the fact that by the time you get to him, you hate him so much. Then, as you fight him, he continuously tells you how pointless it is to fight him, because you'll never win. Rather than me loving the fight because of the underdog story, it's quite the opposite. I love the fight because he keeps insisting that you can never win, yet you keep defeating him phase after phase. At one point, Ventuswil, who's helping you, talks to him as if he's deranged. He insists that you can't win, yet you keep on beating him with virtually no difficulty. I find that type of thing funny, and even though the fight was even though the fight was easy enough, I still found myself keeping my thumb as far away from the power button as I could in fear of accidentally pressing it, mostly because it was long, not hard. Kingdom Hearts, despite its weird combination of Disney and Final Fantasy, remains one of the series with the most involved story, probably part of its Final Fantasy roots. I haven't played much of Final Fantasy, mostly because I personally find turn-based RPGs like it boring, minus Pokemon that will forever have a spot in my heart. Kingdom Hearts, however, is a real-time RPG, which makes it more engaging and enjoyable. Granted, the only game I finished is the Free Fire 2 Days. Yes, that's how I pronounce it. I've heard it pronounce it other ways, but that's just how I pronounce it. I've beaten Free Fire 2 Days twice, and I enjoyed it very much. It also has one of the most deep and touching storylines of any of the games, with the final boss being, spoiler alert, your best friend Shion. It was one of the hardest fights in the game, the other two being Leech Grave and the Ruler of the Sky. It boasts multiple phases, each one harder than the last. It finally ends with a huge battle, and leaves you with one of the saddest cutscenes in the entire series.
Who are you? Again? It's weird. I feel like I'm forgetting something really important.
You'll be better off now, Roxas.
And we're finally at number 1, but before I reveal it, let's recap. Number 10, iRock, Mario Kart DS. Number 9, the Patrick Robot, Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom. Number 8, Dusk Noir and his Army of Sableye, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Time, Darkness, and Sky. Number 7, Del Lago, Resident Evil 4. Number 6, Goom Boss, Super Mario 64 DS. Number 5, Wizen, Ashura's Wrath. Number 4, Hudraw, Kid Icarus Uprising. Number 3, Evelabert, Rune Factory 4. Number 2, Shion, Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. And finally, that's right, one of my personal favorite GameCube games growing up, along with Super Smash Bros. Melee, the Mario Party games, and Mario Kart Double Dash, Luigi's Mansion. This game has so many great boss fights, but one of my absolute favorites has to be Blue Losses. Personally, I love the way the fight is presented. At this point in the game, you already have the quest to collect all of the boos. They have figured this out too, so they get together to form the biggest boo in the mansion. I love this fight because of the way you have to beat him. I remember being stumped as to how to beat him at first. Then we figured out that you have to pop him. When doing this, all of the boos scattered, and you have to catch each one individually by freezing them with your newly acquired ice emblem. I think it's impossible to get them all in one go, so then they reform into a smaller version of Blue Losses, relative to how many you've managed to catch. You keep doing this until he's eventually reduced to one single boo, all the while getting smaller and quicker. This boss fight brings back so many memories of my brothers and I playing this game and loving it. My younger brother, who actually owned it, used to be able to beat this game within a day if he started early enough. This game brings back so many nostalgic memories, and is by far one of the best GameCube games I've ever played. Well, I hope you enjoyed my list. Feel free to comment if you have any ideas on who you think I should have put in the list, and as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.